Welcome back, everyone. So as announced before the coffee break, this is the session where basically the 4 intellectual outputs of the project will be presented. So I just give the word to the representative of the first intellectual output, needs analysis, Maja Miličević, Petrović.
Thank you, Marko. Good morning, everyone, online and here in the room. Okay, maybe it's better if I sit down. No, or not. I'm too short. Okay. Okay, so I'll try this way. Okay, so I'll start this session by presenting a digest version of the results of our needs analysis. So that was our first intellectual output, and it was a fairly complex analysis. The overall objective was to explore, was thinking, of course, of students in language and linguistics related courses. The overall objective of the UPSKILLS needs analysis was to further explore the gap between the knowledge and skills that are typically acquired at universities and the knowledge and skills that are commonly required by the labor market. So we had already done a preliminary needs analysis during the project preparation stage, but what we did when the project had already started was much more comprehensive. So that was an additional step. The needs analysis had a total of 6 components. The first one was a survey of existing curricula in language and related degrees across Europe. So we had a look at the courses that are present in degree programs in Europe, and we tried to identify what was missing. And the idea was for us to offer teaching materials for those subjects that were possibly missing. We also conducted a literature review in which we looked at both academic papers, at industry reports, and also at institutional position papers. We also created a corpus of job advertisements that address linguists who also have some knowledge of technology related to working with languages. So not simply translators or copy editors, but positions that also require some technical knowledge. Then we used the results from this corpus-based analysis of the collected job advertisements as input to create a questionnaire that we sent out to various representatives of the language industry. And then we also had a second step that also involved contacts with the language industry representatives that comprised a focus group like interviews. That's what we had a smaller number of representatives there. So we had different sources of knowledge about what is required by the contemporary language industry and what is already present in universities across Europe. And then as a final step in the needs analysis, we tried to sort of distill the findings of these first 5 components, and we formulated a proposal for a new target profile for language and linguistics students. And I will actually focus on the profile in this presentation. So the profile is what you saw in the title of this presentation as well. So we named this profile Language Data and Project Specialist. The profile is intended as a very generic target profile for students of languages and linguistics. So it is not a proposal for a new BA course or a new MA course. It is intended to be something that lecturers and other stakeholders in any course can use as a guideline in terms of competences required in the contemporary job market. So we have identified for this profile the knowledge, skills, and competences that it is composed of, and we have also identified typical tasks and responsibilities that are associated with this profile. So I'll start with presenting the knowledge, skills, and competences, and this is going to be a bit tricky because I can't move this little window, so in the room you won't be able to see everything clearly. Okay, let's try to do it like this for now. So we have identified 7 core groups of knowledge, skills, and competences. So the first group is disciplinary, the second intercultural, then we have transversal, technical, data-oriented, research-oriented, and organizational knowledge, skills, and competences. And to give you some examples of more concrete, more specific kinds of skills that came up through our needs analysis, under disciplinary, we find the knowledge of specific languages, ability to conduct linguistic analysis, translation skills, and so on. So this is something that is obviously quite well represented already in existing university curricula. The intercultural knowledge, skills, and competencies, again, are well known to all of us. Awareness of specific cultural context, and so on. The transversal skills form a cluster that is also fairly well represented. Many universities these days offer courses on problem solving, presentation skills, writing skills, and so on. So this part, and we will hear more about this again from Jelena a bit later, seems to be quite well covered already. Am I doing something wrong?
I'll just try to help you with this. With this.
Oh, it can actually be. Okay. Yeah, I was a bit worried about clicking the wrong place. Okay, thank you, Boban. Okay, so transversal skills we thought were also fairly well represented. So what we actually mostly focus on is the remaining four groups. So technical skills, where by technical skills we don't only mean ability to use existing language resources, but also having at least a basic knowledge of what they are based on and how they work. So the kind of ability that allows communication with engineers as well, even without complete knowledge of computational linguistics. Data-oriented skills contain the ability to collect, manage, analyze different kinds of language data, some knowledge of quantitative analysis, qualitative as well, familiarity with data standards, and so on. Research-oriented skills obviously focus on knowledge of research design, analytical thinking, critical processing of information, and related skills. And then finally, the last group we identified, which was a bit of a surprise for some of us, at least for myself, for example, was that organizational skills are very much required for all kinds of industry positions, so entrepreneurship, project management, quality control, and so on. So the idea of our profile is, of course, not to say that every student of languages and linguistics needs to know all of this that you see on the slide. The idea is that by having some knowledge, skills, and competencies from each of these groups, our students will have a better chance of finding a language industry job. Now, going back to the talk we heard before the coffee break, this is not to say that all we do in universities is prepare students for the job market. We also need theory and so on. So this is just what we are trying to do is supposed to help add additional skills that might open new positions for new job opportunities for our students. Now, in terms of typical tasks and responsibilities associated with our profile, We identified again 4 main clusters that actually correspond to the clusters within the skills and competencies slide. And what you might notice is that the disciplinary cluster, the intercultural cluster, and the transversal cluster are missing here. But this is not to say that they are not present. This is to say that they are needed for everything. Okay, so there are some tasks that are more data-oriented, like linguistic data collection, transcription of audio files, annotation, and so on. Some are more research-oriented. Research can be either on language data or on business processes in companies. Some tasks are very technical in nature. Well, translation is technical because CAT tools are pretty much necessary today. Then testing of new language-related software. Some tasks are more organizational, communicating with teams, vendors, clients, and so on. But all of these tasks within the language industry require excellent disciplinary knowledge, intercultural knowledge, and excellent transversal skills. So the fact that those 3 clusters are not repeated on this slide does not mean that they are not important. They are just present everywhere. Okay. So our idea is to propose this profile as a guideline for lecturers and other university stakeholders, a guideline that they can use when thinking of courses to propose, teaching materials to create, and so on. But just to link this needs analysis, so this is the final output of our needs analysis, and just to link our needs analysis to the rest of the project, of course, our needs analysis is not a goal to itself. What we wanted to do with this needs analysis is to point out what is needed, and then to work through the remaining 3 intellectual outputs, which will be presented in a moment, to work through these outputs towards the objective of reaching classrooms. Okay, so the main part, the biggest intellectual output is the creation of new learning and teaching materials. This is what will be presented by Jelena, but we also have this part that Marko will talk about integrating research into teaching, and we have an innovative approach to teaching, which involves games and gamification, and you will hear more about this from Stavros. And the final thing that I wanted to mention is that the teaching and learning materials that we are creating in UPSKILLS are closely related to our needs analysis results. So some of the terms might be slightly different, but what we are producing actually corresponds very tightly to the clusters we identified in the needs analysis. Okay, so are we, Marko, will we have questions now, or when we all present there is a discussion, right? Okay, so please write down any questions or comments you might have, and I thank you for your attention and ask Marko to continue. How do I move this to? Oh, okay.
Thank you very much, Maja. So I will basically, I will tell you, am I sharing the slide? I'm sharing the slides also with the online audience. Great. So basically, I will tell you about our second intellectual output that is ongoing, but also in the phase near to completion, which is focused on integrating research and research infrastructures into teaching. And at a later point, Iulianna van der Leek from the University of Utrecht will join us and present the second part of the second deliverable that we discussed in this presentation, which is the guidelines for integrating research infrastructures into teaching. But before that, I will tell you about the guidelines and best practices for research-based teaching that we developed in this intellectual output. There's also a third part that, for reasons of time, we are not presenting, which has to do with industry-based teaching. All right. So basically, what is research-based teaching? It sounds like a transparent and obvious term, but it is also a technical term, and it belongs to basically this four-way classification according to basically the role of the student in the teaching process on the one hand, and the kind of emphasis of the kind of emphasis that there is on research. And now you can look at the slide for the complete classification, but basically research-based teaching is the kind of teaching where the student is an active participant and there is emphasis on the process of research. So it's basically as research-like as it can get, as teaching can ever get. In a different classification that basically goes from research-less teaching to research that equals teaching. Research-based teaching, again, is kind of the most researchful teaching that you can imagine. Okay, why are we talking about this? I think it's clear also after the discussion after the first talk. It's a bit more clear why we focus on this. But basically, the obvious advantage for the students is direct preparation for a research career, right? We're really kind of giving them a preview of what actual real-life academic research looks like. But there are also more indirect advantages, such as it stimulates curiosity, it gives an occasion to practice problem solving and forward thinking, and the students gain independence in such a process, as well as experience. And now it's not only just research experience in general, it's also experience with very many specific assets, for instance, the specific tools, technologies, resources, infrastructures that we use in research. The advantages for lecturers, basically, on one hand, they get the chance to integrate their two core businesses, research and teaching, right? Most of the people working at universities do these two things. It allows for new insights about own research, and it allows for more interaction with students. So if there is if there is something that all research-based courses are, it's interactive. You have to interact a lot. Students have to interact a lot with each other. You have to interact a lot with your students. Okay, so I hear you thinking, or at least some of you, isn't basically if this is your job description, basically, in my case it's like 50 40 10, I think, research, teaching, administration. So if these are your two core businesses, isn't integration of these two what you're doing all the time anyways? Do you really need a project about this? And unfortunately, the answer is, well, this is not what we're doing all the time. These two things actually, as shown in previous research, but it also in our preliminary needs analysis, these two things kind of have separate lives. Although they're performed by the same people, they're typically planned, performed, and evaluated separately. So, just we are kind of the place where they meet, but they don't really meet. And the connection between them, that is actually the object of study of a domain called research teaching nexus, actually receives extremely little attention in most academic institutions. So it's very rare for us to kind of have a moment and reflect what is the relation between our research and our teaching, how much overlap, what can we integrate with each other, and so on. And this has actually been shown in research that really targeted this specific topic. So in Visser-Weinstein's dissertation, she shows that we academics really think about these things in kind of two different mindsets, kind of two different brains. So what she found is that academics' conceptions of research-based teaching, research teaching nexus are related to their conception of teaching and not to their conception of research and knowledge. So that basically, when we are in our kind of teaching mode, we actually activate what we know about teaching, which we also acquired in a different setting, in a different period in our development, but we don't really use our conceptions of research and knowledge in this setting. I have to ask how I'm doing time-wise because I cannot see a clock. I can see a clock. This got resolved really quickly. Basically, why don't we do, so if this is, again, if these are our two core businesses, why don't we do more of research-based teaching? There are indications that especially the first experience with research-based teaching may be quite frustrating. My favorite interpretation offered, again, in the literature is that it's kind of, it always fails our expectations because our expectations are initially very high because, you know, I know a lot about teaching, I know a lot about my own research, obviously. So how difficult can it be? And then it turns out to be difficult. It turns out to be more time consuming to plan such a course in which you teach what you research. And also, like really the implementation itself seems to be full of these obstacles where you discover that, you know, things that you totally take for granted are totally not understood by the students. You have to invest more time, you have to change your plan, and so on. However, this is not a hopeless endeavor. There's actually recognition from actual teachers that this is a meaningful activity. This is something that we need to do more. So our preliminary needs analysis shows that a bit over 50% of lecturers indicate that they integrate research into teaching, while around 75% indicate that they would be happy to follow dedicated training focusing on this. So this is really like, you know, an indication that we have a strong case here. We have a gap to fill. So our deliverable that is aiming to fill this gap are guidelines and best practices that we are producing in the course of this intellectual output. We'll share with you the draft of the guidelines in an email that we'll send to all the participants after this event. We'll ask you not to spread it because it's a work in progress. And then I'll just very briefly tell you about the contents of the guidelines for integrating research into teaching, so that once you get the actual document, you know, you have some motivation to actually open it and browse through it. So it features instructions for choosing and developing a course subject. We discovered that's actually also not obvious. What facet of your research can you turn into a course? A detailed pick and choose list of research-related topics, also covering the general topics, so you don't have to think, you know, what is research to me? What are the basic concepts that I want to introduce? We made this list of basic concepts, and then you can pick and choose and kind of put together your own course. Detailed pick and choose a list of research-related learning outcomes. Again, a very extensive list that you just need to kind of go through and delete everything that you do not need. Instructions for making instructions for students. Again, as I mentioned, this is not something obvious. Very often you give instructions in your research-related kind of task, and then you realize that the students do not understand half of the words that you're using because you're taking for granted a lot of terminology or just, you know, terms that are used in a certain way in your area of research. Instructions for organizing and supervising the work, evaluation and grading, and also a brief section about how to meaningfully kind of conclude this story even after the course. Then we give you a course description template so that for people, for instance, who are interested in piloting our guidelines, you can give us a description. We give you an overview of course examples. I think now there are 5. There will be at least 5 more in the upcoming months. And then annexes that include the structure of a research report. Again, kind of predefined that then the actual teachers can adapt them, and an assessment survey. And now I would like to give the word to Iulianna van der Lek. Iulianna, can you hear us? Can you join us?
Yes, can you hear me, Marko?
So basically, yes, I can absolutely hear you.
Okay.
So shall I move your slides? I cannot hear you because now so I cannot see you. How do I get my this? Right? Yes.
Will you move my slides, or can you make me presenter, or I can't? Otherwise,
shall I make you a presenter?
Yeah, but we don't have much time, so just I think we have 2 minutes, or do I get more?
You can. I think you can. We started a bit later, so you can take
Okay.
5 minutes. I executively decided.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jelena van der Lek, Training and Education Officer at Clarin ERIC, which is a research infrastructure, European research infrastructures for language resources and technology. We are based at the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, but we are in an independent organization. Next. When you will consult the research-based teaching guidelines that Marko just presented, you will find detailed templates for defining learning outcomes. And this template is split between, let's say, the research, the learning outcomes related to the research skills of the students. And then a second part is related to the interaction. How do we teach the students interact with infrastructures and techniques? So in order to ease the work of the teachers and also of the students, as part of the UPSKILLS project, we create an additional guidelines to show the teachers how they can use these large European research infrastructures that manage a large number of text collections and data sets and tools across Europe and beyond. They exist, but apparently, based on the needs analysis, teachers and students are not so much familiar with this kind of, with these large research infrastructures and how they can use them. So we think that any base language resource course should also make the students aware about the whole life cycle of creating these language resources in the context of open science. So looking at the new language, the new profile that Maja just presented for language specialist, language and project specialist, we tried to identify those aspects, data-related skills and technical skills where the research infrastructure, or at least the knowledge that is shared via the Clarin infrastructure, could contribute to the development of these skills. So here in this diagram, I just highlighted the data acquisition and collection stage. So at this stage, in the preparatory stage, where the students are encouraged to acquire and create collections of data, we can teach them to search via the repositories, data catalogs, make them aware of the IPR and legal issues related to data reuse, and also teach them how to cite properly every time they use a language resource from a repository. During the data curation and annotation phase, the students need to be aware of the standards and formats used in their own community, and show them different types of annotation layers, and also tools that they could use to automatically annotate the text collections that they found via the repositories. During the linguistic analysis and research phase, they can use these core services that we also have developed at Clarin to help the students quickly query the metadata of these language resources stored across different national repositories, and also within the resources at the same time, use the infrastructural tools to analyze and visualize the data, combine data from different sources, and also teach them interoperability standards. And then, of course, at the end of a project, either related to a BA or an MA thesis, we could, even though we might not ask them to archive let's say, the data sets produced during a research project in a public repository such as Clarin, because at the BA level, the students might be probably beginner researchers, they should be made aware of this, of the basic research data management steps. When depositing the resource or when creating a new resource, they should be aware of the type of standards that these repositories accept when depositing, archiving, and sharing data. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Next slide, please. Okay, so here in September, we will prepare, by September, we will make available this short guide, not short, it's actually very long, long guide for teachers, how to integrate the research infrastructures into teaching. And here I refer, this is based on our knowledge at Clarin research infrastructure. The guide contains specific recommendations how to integrate the infrastructure in the university curricula and how to design a course based on what just Marko presented. Basically, the teachers who are using already Clarin in their research could design a research-based course based on the guidelines that Marko just presented. And then I will give more specific instructions or how to reuse the courses that Clarin is going to develop, is currently developed in UPSKILLS, and whose outline you can see on the right-hand side. Introduction to language data standards and repositories. So this is a specific course providing ready-made material, tutorials and handouts to demonstrate how to use the research infrastructural services in the classroom. And in addition, we also provide an overview of other training resources that you can find on the knowledge infrastructure of Clarin, and examples of courses and teaching practices that we have collected via different sources. And the next slides just contain an overview of what's coming. Basically, the core Clarin services that you can use to show the students how to find language resources that might help them answer some research questions. This is one example of the Clarin Virtual Language Observatory. This is a metadata search in the repositories across Europe. So it doesn't contain data. You just you can use it to just locate interesting data. And it is useful as a first step to identify which language resources are available. Next. Another core service that we have developed is called Content Search. This allows you to search for specific patterns across corpora at the same time. You will be able to, once you locate an interesting resource, you'll be able to download it and query it in other processing tools, or even perform more advanced query analysis on the repository itself where the resource is stored. Again, it is very useful to use in the first step, in the resource discovery step, in those projects where students are encouraged to search for data independently. Next. And students can also be encouraged to use discipline-specific repositories. Here is just an example of the Austrian repository for a resource center for humanities-related research in Austria that you can also find via the database on the Clarin website. So this is a Clarin B Center, which allows researchers to store, archive, and share their research data. And this type of repositories usually also provide support regarding the standards and formats, conversion of preparation of data, and also provide support with the choice of licenses. Next. The Clarin resource families, this is a user-friendly overviews of well-curated corpora and tools. So when you are looking for a trustworthy corpus that you want to use in your classroom, take a look at this, this collection of large corpora. This is organized per topic and per language, and the students might will be able to query some of these corpora directly with concordances, such as corpus and context, for example. Next.
So maybe, so it doesn't look like I'm giving more time to my IO. Maybe we can wrap up.
Yeah, we can wrap up. So you can view the next slides just for your reference to just get an overview of what's out there. And we will let you know when the guidelines and the courses are available for piloting. Thank you.
Thank you, Iulianna. So now we are moving on to Jelena Gledić, who is the lead of the third intellectual output. Jelena, take it away.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Marko, and thank you, everyone. And it's actually the University of Belgrade that's the lead, and I'm very happy to be representing the team and also the whole team in the UPSKILLS project that's working on IO3. IO3 is sort of the most cumbersome intellectual output, I think, of our project, and hopefully it's going to wrap up everything that's been done already in the other intellectual outputs that we presented, and also then the cherry on top is going to be IO4, which will be presented later on. So as mentioned this morning by Stavros, the IO3 is focused on adapting and developing learning materials. The core objective of this intellectual output is to produce the learning content which is actually going to be presented to students of language-related subjects in the context that was already presented to you today. And there are four components of this intellectual output. First, the overview of existing materials, because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and we also wanted to help provide those who will be using our materials some other additional resources that have already been developed. Because one thing that we did notice, and I'll be mentioning this again later on, is that a lot of things already exist. It's just that people don't know about it. It's all these links that are available on the internet, but they're not all collected in one place. The second and most difficult task, I think, for us has been the creation of new learning content. So finding something that is actually needed, that will be used, and that doesn't exist already, and that won't become obsolete very soon. So those are some of the challenges that we've been facing. The third is the formulation of student research projects, which will ensure the research-based teaching that was already mentioned previously by Marko. And then finally, the dissemination of the created learning content, for which events like this are key. Of course, multiplier events where we're trying to sort of present to you what's already done and to get you on board so that you follow what we do, and as it comes out, hopefully apply it in your teaching, and hopefully it will be useful for you. It's not only for the purpose of promotion, but also for getting feedback, because we really want to make sure that what we produce is useful. So we really value any kind of feedback we get in these kinds of events, and I hope that you will also give us some valuable insights into what we can do perhaps to make our materials even more useful for you. Now, as I mentioned, just to see the check marks, so the overview of existing materials is the part of this intellectual output that is already done. So I will dive a bit into that, because I think that's something that can be immediately useful to you all. And the overview of learning materials aimed to educate students of languages and linguistics for the 21st century job market is the title of this report. And this report is already available on the UPSKILLS website, so you can read the full report there. And you have a table of all the resources at the end of the report. So this is something that is immediately useful for you. There's a total of 276 resources that have been collected that are already available, and they will be in one or another way integrated into the UPSKILLS materials. And the focus when we were researching this was on three broad topics. One was research skills, the other was data acquisition skills, and then data handling skills. And of course, there were the two cross-cutting components that were already mentioned this morning, linguistic theory and research and data management, which were sort of the frames for the learning content that we are aiming to create. And what we did to find these materials, we searched public platforms. Of course, there are a lot of online courses and online learning materials that are available out there. So we went through those. The only criteria was that it had to be free and freely accessible. We did include those where you need to register, but not those where you need to pay any kind of fee. We also looked at existing European infrastructures that also offer a wealth of learning and teaching materials. And we looked at other previous projects and, of course, our own materials, because members of our team have been working on these kinds of issues for a while now, and there's a lot of things already produced there. And what I'd like to focus on is this. It's a sort of edited version of Table 7, which you will find in the report, and it kind of wraps up nicely what's been done in previous stages of the project. So in the first column, you can see the topics that are the learning materials that we are developing. And then in the next three columns, you see the status and the needs analysis. So in the first one is the presence in university curricula. So how present these topics are in the university curricula. And immediately you can see that there is not a high presence of any of them. So the preliminary analysis that we performed before the project proposal proved to be correct. So these are topics that are in fact not that much taught in present university curricula. Then in the literature review, that's the third column, you can see how important these topics are, and a lot of them are quite highly important. And in job adverts as well, so in the corpus analysis that we performed, there's a sort of match for a majority of these topics of their importance for current language and literature, language and linguistics graduate students when they enter the job market. So these are sort of the needs that are there. And then if we look at the material coverage, which is what was done in this task in Intellectual Output 3, so the status and the material coverage, what is available out there for students if they see that these are important topics and they want to learn something on their own. So the overall coverage shows that there are only a few topics that are already covered. So obviously the market has picked up on the fact that programming, machine learning, and statistics are skills that linguistics and language students definitely need. So there really is a wealth of materials on these topics that students can use to educate themselves. Whereas for the other topics, this is not as high, but something where in our project, of course, we adapted our approach so to focus more on those areas where there are less materials available. But one thing that is very clear, where we can have a sort of advantage when it comes to the materials we are creating, is the fact that the materials that are out there, they're not necessarily geared specifically towards language and linguistics students. So where we can help is having examples, having research problems that are specifically oriented towards language and linguistics students. The only exceptions are programming and text processing, where there are materials available for programming. That's not odd. It's been a decade, I think, already that everyone knows that language students go a lot into the tech industry. But this sort of gives a nice overview of the fact that what we are producing is in fact needed by the market. It is not that present in university curricula, and there are sparse materials already available, and there is a space for adapting them specifically towards this student target group. So this hopefully shows the usefulness of the materials and for the needs for teachers to include them in their teaching. Now, how do we intend to reach these classrooms in your classrooms? First, of course, we really welcome you to use this overview of existing material. We produce this to be useful for us, but also for you already. We hope our materials will once be on such resource list someday as well. The second is the learning content, and there will be more talk about that after lunch today as well. And these are these modular unit blocks that will be on Moodle, which you can use directly in your teaching, and we'll talk more about that in a dedicated session this afternoon. And then the third, the research projects that are going to be coupled with this learning content. So if you want to have specific problems that your students work on, we will have packages of research projects connected with each topic. And we hope to have these different courses that you've heard about already twice, and you will hear about again, because this is the core of what we're trying to present here today. We hope to have these disseminated across partner institutions, so those institutions that are within the project and beyond. And for the sake of time, I think I'll end here. You'll see me again this afternoon. Thank you for your attention. Stavros, off to you. And
it's very, very super efficient. I hope you can hear me, people from online, because I can't see anyone online. So can you just confirm that? I don't know. Anyway, I hope that. Okay, yes, great. Thank you. Let me also find my next set of slides. A little bit of help. Marco, where do I go? Stop sharing. Okay. Oops, what did I do?
And now go to and now you can actually go to the WebEx and share, and then pick what you want to share.
Yeah, and then I'll share.
Right.
Okay. So what I do? Share screen. Okay, I'll find it. Apologies, everyone. All right. So, yeah, I hope that you can see my screen now. Let me just also try to minimize. Yeah. Okay. So I'll try to not take up a lot of time either because we need to have some time as well for discussion. Just to motivate a bit, I'm going to be talking to you about the fourth intellectual output. This is the one that we haven't yet completed, but we've started like taking steps into it. This has to do with the integration of educational games within our teaching. And just to give some motivation for this, as part of the needs analysis, we conducted the survey of business sector. So basically, we contacted companies that hire linguists and language graduates, and we asked them about their opinion about the stuff that graduates of linguistics and language degrees most often lack and need to improve before entering the workforce. And this is a list of everything, and I think that gaming actually connects quite well with the issues of problem solving, communication skills, creativity, and to a certain extent analytical skills. And I'm going to explain why in just a bit. Obviously, this is available online as well alongside our other outputs, so you can have a look to see the methodology and the analysis of the questionnaire. Now, why games are the way to go? I think that I'll try to convince you about this. Generally, gamification or educational games and whatnot have been at the center of attention over the last few years as a reaction to traditional lecturing. And as Chatfield suggests, modular-based structure is usually delivered in big, ugly, rather than unpleasant lumps that presents a relatively limited picture of student progress. So basically, it's the lecturer gets in the classroom, they start talking, and they assume that the students will understand what they're saying, and with limited interaction at that as well. Again, we see that this is changing. One of the big advantages of trying to think in terms of educational games or gamification, and I will explain what this is in a bit, is that by gamifying the learning experience, you can actually assess constantly as you are teaching. You can assess the abilities of the learner, and then you can also tweak your learning content to match what they're expecting and how good they are, how well they can acquire the stuff that you're teaching them. And also, and this is actually why we got into this whole gaming culture, is that games can provide a unique cognitive stimulation and motivation to further study. And I think that the premise here should be self-explanatory in a way, right? I mean, if you're playing a game, you are learning things, but without realizing that you're putting an effort. You're just trying to solve a riddle, so to say. Again, by games, we're not talking, Fortnite and stuff like that. We're talking about puzzles that you have to solve, and they are related to the curriculum. Now, games, according to the literature, games have a unique potential of teaching and learning, unlike any other medium. And that's because gameplay can enable the growth of the participant both intellectually and socially, and we'll talk a bit about why it's socially relevant as well. And also because the experience is a positive one, it sort of sticks with the participant. So they're learning on the go and they're having fun, which means that they get that they retain a lot more knowledge than otherwise. And learning through games has to do obviously with the game content. This is what we are trying to develop here as well. Has to do with the goals of the actual teaching and the goals of the students in getting the knowledge that they need to get. Continuous problem solving, and obviously the gaming culture also has to do with social interaction. So playing the game is not just a solitary thing where you just play your game. You can also form a group and discuss strategies of going forward and whatnot, especially for the kinds of games that we are looking into. Students get to remain engaged because they are not just reading a book or learning through a textbook or whatnot, or slides. They get engaged because they're doing things while learning stuff. They get excited, hopefully, they interact with one another and problem solve and learn at the same time. At the same time, games have been shown to spark interest-driven learning among students and teachers alike, and that's because they can establish new interests that the student then further explores and investigates. So in the context of a game, you might have to solve a problem that would resemble the workplace, let's say, and then the students would think outside the box rather than within the remit of the lectures per se. They inspire students to pursue questions and answers, to developing questions while playing, and they also create an environment that leads to intrinsically motivated authoring. So basically, it gives the students the power to take control of their learning. Then when it comes to the types of educational games, and actually we will be focusing on both of them, for UPSKILLS, we have custom-made educational games. We are trying to work with a particular game engine in order to develop materials along the lines of educational games. These allow for specialized learning because you can actually tweak the game and add your own content into it. And then obviously this content would have to be linked with specific learning objectives you have. So in our case, we're trying to create like narratives that might resemble the workplace or give a problem within a particular field, like programming or machine learning or human experimentation or whatever, or conducting research with human subjects and whatnot. And then by tweaking the content, we can actually gamify the whole experience. And the idea here is that we, as the curators of the content and game designers, can collaborate to tie the game to the specific learning content as well. And this is the plan that we have for this part of the project. Then there are also, commercial off-the-shelf games, which can be very easily used. And we have identified a number of them. These are basically, quite effective in teaching because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can find a ready-made. I mean, there are actually quite a number of games out there that tackle, let's say, data handling skills or how to create a data management plan. And you can just, use that as an add-on to your lecture in order to motivate the students even further and help them think about how to develop data management plans. Teachers, of course, needs to understand all aspects of the game and then tie it to the specific learning objectives in an overt way. Now, what are we going to teach through games? Obviously, we can teach anything, but what we are going to focus on a bit more in our case is going to be transversal skills because most games focus on problem solving and critical thinking. So they're like puzzles you have to solve and progress, and that's what gives you this sense of gratification, while also some can also create a sense of community. And because, in a game scenario, you might have to collaborate with others within your group in order to solve the riddle or the problem or whatever have you. Games can be used to introduce a problem by presenting a make-believe world. Like assume that you're working for a newspaper and you have to copy edit something, how would you do it or whatnot. What's important here is that what we're trying to do is basically to make the parallelism explicit, like to say, to make it explicit how the game scenario could translate in a real life work scenario. And that is why we are also partnered up with companies to give us these scenarios that we're going to use. And basically the whole point from our perspective, especially when it comes to the employment prospects of our graduates, it has to do with like playing a game that's immersion based can create the illusion of a workplace, let's say. So while learning statistics or while learning, machine learning and whatnot, they can work with real life projects that they could actually find in their career paths. And also another thing that we are exploring, but we haven't yet figured out, is how we can also tie up games with assessment, because we're pretty sure that if you're assessed with a test as opposed with a game, it's quite a different experience and it might make it more engaging for the students to be assessed and learn even more. And this has to do with the actual game. So the content that we will include in a game, let's say, or the ready-made games that we could use in our content. Apart from this, however, we also, in order to make our content a bit more interactive, we're also thinking about gamification, and we have a plan to apply gamification to our content. Now, usually people, when they hear the word gamification, they assume that it's the creation of educational games. This is actually wrong. It's basically the incorporation of dynamics associated with game design in education. So basically, everyone gamifies their lectures, even nowadays, to the extent that you are, doing some formative assessment and give students rewards if they do well or whatnot. This is a part of gamification. And the reason why we are trying to steer away from just games, from just a from just a game where students learn to a gamified experience, is that there is reason to believe that just using gameplay to learn is tricky. You cannot convince the students, especially university students, that they will learn, because usually the reaction you get is, I came here to learn, not to play a game. So we are trying to mix and match the gamified experience with traditional tasks and whatnot that you would expect to do. And another reason why we turned into the gamification is more empirically based, and it has to do with a survey that we conducted, where we got about, I don't know, 600 students from across the consortium responding about their gameplay preferences. And it seems that, over a quarter of students don't really play games. So, we cannot overdo it with the gaming. And also the majority plays games casually. So they just play like for the 5 minutes on their mobile and that's it. Which means that we cannot just create a game for each unit. It's best to just include these components rather than rely on games only. Now, gamification, again, has been shown to allow students to develop both their curricular and cognitive as well as social competencies, because they make learning more engaging, much like with the games, and fun, by contextualizing learning in a setting where they learn by doing rather than by listening to the lecture. And they also give students a chance to develop their transversal skills, because they will have to collaborate eventually in a gamified environment, and to conduct a task that would revolve around a storyline more likely. Now, how we will engage in gamification, or we are already engaged in gamification, we're trying to incorporate features of game design into the learning content blocks. Basically, as Jelena mentioned, and the others before her, we are going to employ Moodle, which is an open access source, in order to present our learning content and whatnot. And then we want to also, within Moodle, add these things that people use all the time, but they don't know that they're about gamification. So the ability to upload avatars and create pictures and whatnot within Moodle, have a point system for achievements and then completion badges and whatnot, which have been they're little things, but they have been shown to increase motivation. Clearly signposted progression stages with progress bars that show where you are in a particular course. And when decided by the content creators, also a storyline for the whole block or unit, or perhaps a leaderboard for competitive tasks. Like, one of the units could be, at the end of this unit, one of you is going to be hired by a high-tech company, and then you can work towards this goal. And this wouldn't be, it would be a gamified experience rather than a game. So in order to move towards gamified learning, we are, what we need is a bit of a change of mentality, and I would like to focus this. I think this is the last slide that I have. The idea here is that one of the things that we have to tackle, and I've already mentioned it, I think, before, even in my intervention during the plenary talk, apart from the lecturers themselves who don't really want to change their ways, also students have a specific expectation of what they're going to do, especially when they come to tertiary education, which means that students will also resist a completely different approach to learning. Like, they might say, okay, why am I doing this? I'm supposed to learn from you, not, play around with data myself or whatnot. And this is because in previous school experience, they are used to this, and that's what they expect as well at this stage. Also, it's their expectation because they assume that, okay, I'm at university, this is a serious place, so I need to be very serious and focus on what they're telling me and not say anything. I think the important thing here, and what we're trying to do, at least pedagogically, is to also engage with the students and help them understand that it's not about playing a game, performing an experiment, doing a task or whatnot. It's essentially teaching them in a way that has been shown to help them learn more efficiently and retain information more, rather than just listening to someone feed you the information on their own. And what they will gain through the gamification, in combination obviously with task-based learning, we assume I mean, the research has shown that it can improve their communication skills because they will have to collaborate while playing a game and solving puzzles and whatnot. They can become more adaptable and resourceful in the sense that if they cannot solve the game or the puzzle in a way, they have to find alternative ways. And again, this enhances their communication. These are the basic things. And thank you very much. I hope I stayed within time. I'm assuming we have some time for questions and discussion, basically. I mean, we need your feedback as to how reasonable all this sounds, or how successful you think that might be.
Indeed. So if you didn't hear Stavros, we definitely need your feedback, not only on the last part, but basically on the whole overview of the project. So basically anything, right? Even the things that we presented as nearly complete, please feel free to tell us, even if you feel like, we need to do it all again and do it all differently. Please tell us. We'll be happy to have your feedback. There are also people from the project telling me not to say this.
Whoever suggested this is going to do the thing.
Exactly. So I just volunteered to redo whole intellectual output. Yeah. So people from the audience. I'm trying to look both into the chat and in the room. Also, we'll have kind of this as a specific dedicated question, but also how applicable these things sound to your real life and your real teaching practices.
Yeah.
Marco?
Yes, so basically now we are listening to a question from the audience.
Okay.
I will summarize it. Apologies. This is basically, the way we have to do it due to the fact that we can't really have a mic that we pass around because COVID. So please finish your question, Petra, and then I will. So there has been a question from Petra Mishma from the University of Nova Gorica, who asked first what kind of employers we interviewed in our needs analysis IO, and the second part, whether there are any regional tendencies, basically, or Europe behaves as a whole when it comes to the responses that we got from these employers. And then I think Maja wants to take this question.
Stavros can give examples of companies because Stavros was more directly involved in interviews.
In the interviews, yes. Okay, so there were two parts of the thing. So we had the survey where we had like respondents from many different companies, different sizes, and different also places around Europe. I'd imagine you can establish a difference because there were companies like from Switzerland, like big conglomerates and whatnot. There were also local companies from Serbia, let's say, that cannot hire like huge teams of linguists. I think that generally the distinction, I think the trends are the same. I think what is different is the expectation about the role that someone would play. Like, you would expect in a big company, they are hiring people who they can use for a very specific, like, for training a model or for checking the output of a model and whatnot. Whereas in smaller companies and in smaller places, I would imagine they would need people with many different hats on. So someone who's a project manager, / they can also check the translation, / they can also do some annotation and whatnot. The perceptions, I imagine, are slightly different depending on I think it's on the size of the company more than on the locality if I'm not mistaken. And it has to do basically with the mentality of the, like, if you have a big company, then you have more specialized positions, and you can also appreciate that. What transpired, at least what for me was quite surprising and very, promising for our research and for basically for what we're doing here, is that, big companies, and I shouldn't name because they, but like the biggest you can think of, they are specifically looking for linguists rather than computer scientists or engineers, because they believe that with a bit of training, the linguist can do a much better job, because they have a knowledge also of the system, not just the programming and the aspects of that. I would imagine that, especially representing Malta, which is a very small country, the impression there, and general the impression I'm getting there, is that they tend to link NLP at least, or natural language processing or automated translation, with computer science rather than with specialized translators or language graduates and whatnot. I hope this is answering a bit here. Yeah.
In terms of types of companies, we have had quite a few language service providers, so translation agencies, different kinds of language services. But there was also, I think, at least one insurance company.
There was one insurance.
Various other sectors that have some aspect in their business that is related to language.
So there was even an automobile company, because they have to, like, for the speech synthesis, like speech, whatever, recognition stuff and whatnot. As I said, also from the two biggest multinationals you can think of. So there was a nice representation, and there were a couple also of localization agencies at a smaller scale.
If I can just add, sort of related to this question, but it's something that I don't know if I'll forget to emphasize sufficiently today. So one thing that we really want to emphasize is that this is a very changing thing, a very situational thing. University of Belgrade also did some previous projects of adapting curricula to the labor market, and the labor market is really
volatile.
So what we're trying to emphasize is sort of this mentality of adaptability and change and the necessity to always improve. So we don't want a big illusion that we're really making something that will make you employable in 5 years or so, but more so just to...
I think that the needs analysis, and one of its main, for me, the most significant sort of result, apart from the broader categories that we have come up with, and I think that they're good. It is precisely this, that what the company people told us, especially in the interviews, is that we don't really care about if someone, obviously, they would need to be familiar with programming. They would need to be familiar with automatic CAD tools and whatnot, right? But we don't really care, because we're going to train them. So the whole point is someone is, malleable to a certain extent. And as long as the students are aware of this and they're willing to learn, and that's what we're like, our materials are supposed more to inspire rather than create the perfect programmer. It's like to introduce students of a different background to more technical subjects or to a different way of thinking. I think that this is the important, the different contribution. Like, we're not presenting a curriculum, like, take it and it's gonna,
It's about the mindset, perhaps more than about the specific.
Yes,
it is. And then this turned into a project meeting.
And the biggest gripe that we had, like, across the interviews at least, was, that they felt that most graduates of, at least that they are so stuck in their, like, little world that, it's fascinating, but you also have to be adaptable and think about, not just morphology, but also meaning or, distributional semantics or things that are outside your comfort zone.
So we have two more questions from the chat. So Iulianna, I hope I pronounced it correctly. Very interesting, thank you. I wonder which level students should have to use successfully this kind of methodology, especially the research-based one. So since it's about the research-based one, I'll just answer briefly, but I think other colleagues have things to add. Basically, we are targeting in this project, as BA as possible, as younger as possible. And in my experience, actually, research-based teaching works really well also at early stages. So I was trying out kind of the same concepts in PhD courses and in BA courses, and sometimes the uptake is actually incredible in the BA courses. Of course, you need to kind of set your, I think, in the case of courses that I was teaching, basically the empirical focus differently. So sometimes you have to like build a whole course about, okay, there is this claim in the literature, there is this, in this description of this language, it says that this is going on. We're going to check whether this is really happening using this methodology. But then once you set the frame right, research-based teaching at BA level is not science fiction at all. If other colleagues have things down
Just
here.
confirm,
Yeah,
we
okay.
primarily target BA students.
Yeah, undergraduate BA students, yeah.
We resolved that one quickly. So we hope we gave a complete answer. Miličević, thank you very much. Have you thought about developing different learning cycles in inquiry learning or making recommendations on how different context seminars can be linked to build on each other for the best possible progression? So basically, whether it all adds up to right.
So
So
the
I guess the
idea-
first answer is basically what we're creating are different modules that then so we're not making a program.
Yeah.
And we are also definitely not making a single course. So our materials are modular structured so that the actual end users of our materials who are teachers or university lecturers, they can make the most out of it by taking whatever level of granularity of these materials and incorporate it in their courses. But we are not going beyond that in the sense that we don't make like a you cannot take all our materials and then you have an MA program or something like that.
And in terms of progression, so since we're trying to adapt it to a wide variety of students, both in terms of their place in their studies and their research interests, because we target both linguistics, but then also modern languages students, we link everything, and I'll talk about that as well. So we link everything to learning outcomes, and you can see how what we produce should target a specific learning outcome, and then we position the potential user in it as well. So in that sense, it can all be taken apart.
And there is there is at least the perspective of clearly linking our materials to each other, so that indeed, if a teacher decides to use, let's say, in one semester one of our courses, and then in the next semester the next one, it will be immediately clear what is already covered by the previous one, and then of course that could be done differently, gone over more quickly, and so on.
Blocks.
Well,
That part of our courses.
Yes,
exactly.
learning blocks.
The technical term that we really try to implement is unit blocks.
Yeah.
Any more questions from the audience? Remarks? Other things? So what we realize is that we are presenting a whole lot, and we are basically telling you, there's all this, and it will take you a while to look at all of it and decide whether you will really need it or not. But
generally, I mean, what's the instinctive reaction to this? Like, does this make sense? Does this seem like a good way to go, given current standards in education and things like that? I think that this is the most important thing for us. Do you think students would be?
In my opinion, it's an extremely good way to go.
Okay.
What kind of worries me is the gap between where we are and where we need to be.
Yeah.
It's a remarkable gap. That's the point.
But that is, I mean,
so
I
let me
think.
just summarize what
Sorry,
Petra
yes,
said. So basically, Petra Mišmaš from the University of Nova Gorica had the comment that basically it all sounds really the right way to go. However, what is a worry that kind of raises in this case is the gap between where we are, where we need to get. We kind of found the place where we need to get, but the gap is still giving her some worries. And then Stavros?
To this, yeah, I mean, I was going to say that I think that this is precisely the reason why we're going for this modular approach. Like, we don't want to overwhelm someone and tell them, okay, this is a whole course, you do it as we say, but at least, we can, like, the idea is to create the tasks that people can use, and then you can choose depending, but at least it will serve towards a change of like, you don't need to take the whole, I don't know, lesson on something, but you can just take the introductory task to just motivate the students to talk about it. And then slowly, I hope that, we can affect a bit of change. But yes, you're right. I mean, it's well taken, this point, for sure.
We also kind of hope to address this issue in the next session, where we will really show, the idea of just previewing what you're going to hear. Our courses will generally be on Moodle, and the idea is, the teachers can very easily then literally import them into their Moodles and use them and integrate them there. Of course, that does lose us some potential users who don't use Moodle, but you always have that.
No, but at the end of the day, I think that apart from Moodle, yes, we will obviously, share stuff with PDFs as well. Like there will be reports and things, so people could.
Potentially, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, what you say is absolutely true.
Yes,
It's something that's evident in the literature overviews and our own experiences. And we are trying something that's sort of, I don't know, hopelessness. So we're trying to address different kinds of groups, both to, support those people who are already doing this and giving them something and showing them, yes, this is the way to go, giving something easy to use to those who perhaps say, okay, we don't have the time or energy. We'd like to do it, but we don't have the time. Okay, well, now we have this great thing. And then also maybe for ambitious students who really want to learn, but they don't know how to navigate and what to do. And hopefully I will contribute to that a bit.
Thank you so much.
I have one more question in the chat.
Not from you.
I'm quite grateful for the research on integrating gamification into courses. It corresponds to my experience of using games in language classes. If less they claim boring, if too much, okay. If little they claim they're boring, if too much they claim that it's infantilism.
I think we need to find the sweet spot there. That's why we've been thinking about not just, because we started off with thinking about just games. And then we realized, especially from the survey, that people are not like, okay, it's fun, but then, it's not the cup of tea of everyone. It's not proper teaching. So we're trying to, yes, thank you very much.
But this can be challenging for some teachers. So basically the idea that, then it makes sense for you in the European languages. I feel it's quite complex for typologically different languages like modern Chinese, which is my case, for example.
Well,
good that you said that. Thank you.
Chinese here.
Actually, I teach Chinese and Chinese studies in Belgrade. So it would be great to stay in touch. But the thing is that what we are producing is a sort of more general skills that are not necessarily related to language skills. And so in that sense, it doesn't really matter what kind of language, because we did find that so language knowledge, theoretical knowledge, that's already really well covered in existing curricula and in most universities. And that's something that companies don't really complain about either, and something that students don't really lack knowledge in, but more sort of some practical cases. But don't worry, we have someone who's having this kind of maybe European-based, European-focused perspective. So we'll incorporate that as well for sure, and sort of more intercultural, cross-cultural perspective.
I think that the general focus of our stuff would be more on more technical side of things, like digital skills and how to use computers to do stuff with language. And on the other hand, also transversal skills like project management, collaborating between students, which are, I think, not specific to specific languages.
And that's where it becomes very useful, because I'm actually very involved in the both analytical thinking and the project management, and I do try to add this angle of having a completely different perspective. Because I find that for teaching Chinese, it's more about getting into the mindset that will help you with the syntax. It's completely different. So that's what we're trying to incorporate in these other courses as well.
I think, and then there was, I would like to basically just agree, but also add that, I mean, I think because this was primarily referring to research-based teaching. So there is indeed this dynamic, but I think it's a dynamic that we can resolve, where a lot of people who teach, who are at let's say language-specific departments around the world. So we are also the Slavic department, and we are supposed to target specific languages. So sometimes you have a course that is on Slovenian morphology, and then what you're teaching is like general research design. And sometimes people feel like, you know, this is not what I'm supposed to do. I'm introducing something that is, you know, just mine into a course. But what's kind of the way we try to resolve this tension is by making a clear overview of how much of the course is going to be dedicated to that, so that you can have like, you know the 10% of the course is basically taking a step back and giving a wider perspective, but then you have the remaining percentage of really dedicated to the specific focus of the course. And that's, at least in my experience, I've never heard of like institutions, you know, the people who take part in the courses complaining about this. So this is really a matter of just carefully planning the amount of general stuff that you include. But that we actually do address this in our guidelines. So I'm going to think about it based on my experience and talk with Maja. Great ideas, beautiful. Sorry? There are more questions.
There are no more questions.
There are no more questions.
Are the materials centered on European languages?
There are questions.
There are.
Okay, well, we sort of, did say that it's
Yeah,
not
it's-
focused on,
It's not focused on language per se.
Yeah.
It's more on the skills
Yeah.
that are associated with language and linguistics degrees.
They are in English, but yeah, you're free to adapt them.
Of course, yeah.
Then Boban has.
Okay, good.
We just want to know what you said.
It's okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further? So we wanted to make a little. So with all the participants, including the who want to
You
show
can
up,
take a screenshot.
who want to show up? Yeah, I think. I mean, if we just make the participants exactly.
So those
So, okay, we are gonna spontaneously make a group photo as group as it gets. So the participants who don't mind showing up on the screen, you will be shown
Or you can
behind
stop
us.
recording now, right? I mean, and
But they'll be.
I mean, it will be a group photo anyway.
I'm just saying.
So yeah, I'll stop recording in a second, but it doesn't really matter. So the ones of you who don't mind showing up on our group photo, just show up. You will be projected behind us, and we will all come to the front. Is that the idea, Michela? Okay, we'll all come to the front and make a group photo. It's gonna be awkward, but this is what this is life now.
See you at 2 p.m. Sure.
And then is it? I don't remember. Is that
Yes.
okay? So we are continuing with the next session at 2 p.m. after we do the awkwardness.
Yeah, I mean, they can
Join.
or turn. I mean,
Otherwise, I mean, no one believes that you are real. Like, everyone thinks that like, Petra Mishmash is a figment of my imagination. You would like to confirm. Well, now the camera is going to go mad because it adjusts every time that someone moves.
No, everybody's forced.
Emma, it's a lame excuse for not joining.
Wait, there is
People online smiling.
people, exactly. People online, if you don't mind, start smiling.
okay. This is getting weird.
This is so weird.
Yeah.
I was
The
laughing.
upskills. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.